Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing and Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined by James. James, how are you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, dude. I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right, Tar. We have a fun episode for everyone today. Today, we're going to be breaking down a cube skeleton. We're going to be going over what that is and how it can help you with your cube construction. And it's not just going to be helpful if you're building a cube from scratch. It's also going to be nice and helpful if you've had a cube for a while and you just want to double check the numbers, make sure everything is balanced and make sure everything is as it should be. The link to the cube skeleton, there'll be a PDF link down in the show notes below. While you're there, please consider giving the podcast a 5-star review, a thumbs up, all that good stuff greatly helps us out. Also down in the show notes, there will be time codes and a link to a card gallery where you can see any of the cards that we're talking about in today's episode. But with that preamble out of the way, let's jump into our main topic. So today, we are going to be talking about a cube skeleton that we have put together. I think a good place to start is, what is a cube skeleton? Well, basically, a cube skeleton is a template. It tells you how many of each bit you need to add in order to get a working cube together. It's weighted to what generically is the best setup for each colour. So like white and red and green have more creatures, blue has more non-creature spells, red and white have more cheap creatures, and green have bigger creatures. It's a really good starting point if you're looking to put a cube together.
Yeah, I quite like this idea. Building cubes is really hard, especially if you've not done tons of it, and especially if it's a larger size of cube, right? You're building a 540 or something. It can be difficult to get started. It can be difficult to make sure that all your numbers line up to have a balanced play environment. And this hopefully will be like quite a nice little shortcut. It's not something you're going to have to stick to religiously for all your cubes, but it should be some nice guidelines, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Like the idea is that this is the jumping off point. If you follow the cube skeleton, you will end up with a functional cube that just will work. You can then iterate on top of that and make it more your own and customize it as you want. But it's a great starting point because, I remember when I built my first cube, there was nothing like this that really existed. I basically just got a pen and paper and found a similar cube to what I was building and just wrote down how many 1-drops in this color they have and kind of effectively built something similar myself. But I was kind of going in a little bit blind. And kind of the hope is that with this, we've done the hard work for you. You can just take it and use it and crack on and enjoy the fun part of cube that is finding the cool cards, not working out, all right, how many red 3-drops do I need, anything like that. We're taking the faff away from you. And also, we have talked about something similar to this before, like in the past, like on our episode where we talked about the time I built my own mystery booster at home cube. That was a cube of 2,000 cards, and for that, I took the set template that Wizards use to balance sets, and I used it to make a cube. Wizards do this whenever they build a set. They have in Return to Strixhaven is the next set coming out at time of recording, that their notes will have, okay, we need this many 1 white drop commons with roughly these abilities. They have that for the whole template. That's kind of why you do see a lot of the similar types of cards in each set, because they have a slot for it in their guides, which they're looking to fill. Wizards have it for building sets, and this is something similar, but specifically for cube.
Yeah, for sure. And it's nice to, as well, even if you're going to deviate a little bit from these numbers, it's good because you know that you're doing it deliberately, right? If you're, I want this color to have a way lower curve for some reason because that plays well with the themes that are going on, and that's great. You can deviate from it, but it means you're not just having a lower curve because you missed out a bunch of good expensive spells, or you're not. Your red isn't lacking removal because you just forgot about cheap burn spells. It means you can make sure you're where you are deviating from it, you're doing it in a deliberate way for a reason, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think let's kind of touch on some obvious upsides of using a template. And basically, the main thing is it's really good as a way of getting started. I personally am someone who I like to think about, what are the decks? What are the archetypes that you want to go into your cube before you build it? What are the packages? Some people don't want to do that. Some people just want to just start adding cards to a cube. And what's nice is that with a set skeleton, you can do it both ways. You can come up with your packages and come up with your archetypes and then work out where they go into the set skeleton. Or if you want, you can just take the set skeleton and start adding cards that you like. That is something you can do. And if you're doing like a best of cube, a cube that kind of takes the best of a certain period of time or from a grouping of sets or themes, you can really just find your search term in Scryfall and just pick the cards you like and start adding them, and it will work really nicely for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it plays really well into those. I want to say generic cubes, but cubes where your theme is more about, when the cards were printed or artwork or flavor or whatever it is, rather than being themed around something more gameplay specific, where you might be deviating a little more from this template.
Yeah, exactly. Like I used a version of this template of the set skeleton for my old bordered cube, and I've also just used the set skeleton just raw for a new cube I'm building, which is like from 8th edition to Eldraine. It's like modern bordered, but before we get into the I say Eldraine, there's like Thrill of Possibilities, the only Eldraine card in there. We're not doing Oko. We're doing a different rummaging effect. That's like the power level, but for that kind of environment, or for like if you're doing a theme of like a Ravnica cube, you're building a cube set on a plane, or like you're doing like a theme, kind of like the spooky cube, like a horror themed cube, or anything like that. You can just find your search terms and just start adding cards, and at the end of it, you will have a functional cube. That's really nice, and is a really nice cheat code to just being able to quickly make cubes. And it's also great if and just having that peace of mind that it's going to be balanced and is going to function. It's also really nice if you already have a cube and you want to double check your numbers. Like, this is something we touched on during when we did an episode a few weeks ago about like me doing like a check-in on my unpowered vintage cube, which I've had for like 6+ years now. I've not double checked the numbers since I built it. Just going in and like checking it against a set skeleton made me see some points where over time I thought I was quite good as I will always cut a 1-drop for a 1-drop. I'll cut a 2-drop for a 2-drop. But really, I've not. I've mucked around with the numbers, and I saw some points where, okay, I need to cut some of my red 4s and add a bunch of red 1s because I have skimped there, basically. And like a set skeleton is a good, like, even if you already have a cube, it's good. It's a good tool to reset things and just make sure things are balanced going forward.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to just compare those numbers, isn't it? I was looking at it and comparing it to my dual commander cube, which I didn't use any sort of set skeleton building it, but it was kind of interesting to just run through and see where the divergences were. I have significantly more lands, which I kind of knew would be the case because it's a cube where you're encouraging people to play more colors. Plus, there is a very strong lands theme, so there's a bunch of utility lands. Few of the colors have sort of less creatures. I think that's partly intentional on the grounds that you have a creature in your command zone every hand, so you maybe don't need quite as much redundancy in your curve out guys. But yeah, it was. I'm sure there are some spots where I could be, make those comparisons and maybe beefing up some of the interaction counts. I think in a couple of the colors might be worthwhile.
No, 100%, and you can definitely use it as if you've noticed in a cube like maybe a color isn't performing as well, or like a deck isn't coming together. You can look at the underlying numbers and see, is it represented? Like does it have enough pieces? Because because there is a part of cube where if you're not really basing it on anything, and I've done it, I did it a bunch of times in my early cubes where you are just kind of guessing a little bit, like, is this enough? Like we all roughly know that kind of like red has more cheap creatures normally in a cube, but kind of like what's nice is that we have defined it. Like this cube, like the cube skeleton will tell you how many of each bit, how many creatures in each color you need to run, in each point of the curve you need to run. It'll tell you how many planeswalkers, how many instants and sorceries, all that kind of stuff. this tells you what you need to know, and that's, I think, is really nice.
I think on top of that, it's quite nice to check in if you've built your cube and maybe the colors are balanced, but the games just aren't playing out quite in the way you'd anticipated. Like maybe the games are all pretty quick and snowbally. That might be a sign you don't have quite enough cheap interaction in the cube. That might be a good reason to go and check in on this template, see if the template suggests you should be running more interaction or different interaction. Or similarly, if the games are all super attrition-y and no one can get their synergies going, then it might mean, hey, maybe we've got a bit too much interaction, not quite enough threats, you know? So it's, I think, good for just checking in on that stuff as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Before we kind of break down the cube skeleton in a bit more finite detail, and again, there's a link below. While we're talking about it, open it up. It's a PDF. You can look at it. It'll open on any phone, I assume, in 2026. Should be fine. But there are some downsides. Like before we kind of like, whenever we present something to the world, we do want to give both sides of an argument. I don't just want to be like, we have fixed cube. We've solved it for everyone. You're welcome. There are some things you have to consider when using a set skeleton. And the primary one is it won't work for every type of cube. Like, it doesn't work if you're doing something out of the ordinary. Like, James touched on this a minute ago, but like 100 ornithopters, for example, that doesn't work in a set skeleton designed for a normal cube environment because the creatures don't like, oh, my cube skeleton tells me I need 6 white 4-drops. But but if your only creatures are 100 ornithopters, that just doesn't work. So that is something you need to consider. A powered cube as well also won't necessarily work with a set skeleton. And we'll go into reasons why towards the end of the episode when we kind of touch on like reasons to break a set skeleton. But like a powered cube is trying to run all the broken cards, no matter where they are on the curve. It's trying to fit them in as best as possible. So powered cube breaks a set skeleton wide open by running a bunch more 0-drop artifacts and a bunch more blue cards than a regular cube will. It'll run more, and then other points of the curve where just some cards and colors have got more powerful, they will break because it's just trying to do the more broken. It's trying to fit all the broken cards into one environment.
Yeah, for sure. It's you're not going to line up exactly on every cube, right? Because also stuff like the set skeleton includes planeswalkers as a type. You built a pre-modern cube recently, right? So you're not going to have any planeswalkers. But yeah, it's nice as a starting point, isn't it? I was kind of curious using this set skeleton. Are you being sort of flexible at all in moving cards between the types depending on what role they play? Like, let me give you an example, right? If we've got in blue, for example, it suggests 6 counter spells in a 360, and those are in the instance category. If we've got like a Mystic Snake, say, in our cube, are you then like, okay, that's one of my counter spell slots, or not because it isn't an instant?
Well, Mystic Snake has flash, so I'm someone who, like, when I organize a cube, I put it in the point that it should be. So like a good example for me is like a card like Shriekmaw. Like, in my cube list, I put Shriekmaw as a sorcery.
Yes, okay, I think that makes sense, yeah.
Because I'm using it as... it's going into the cube as a 1-on-a-black sorcery speed way of killing something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, rather than just this is what Cube Cobra tells me the types are, so that's what I'm putting into my template.
Yeah, partly that is so I can make the cube... in my head, just like match a skeleton a bit more than it should. Like, we've all, I'm pretty sure everyone counts like Abaddon's Pilgrims or the Hierarchs as green creatures, not 3-color creatures or 2-color creatures, because those slots are a bit more rare.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely take this too far sometimes. I remember in my power cube being like, I do kind of want to keep the colors balanced, but all my Is-It gold cards are dope. Well, I can cast this 3-mana Saheeli for 1 red, so now that counts as a mono red card, right? And I can keep all my Is-It gold cards.
The one that I'm terrible for is X spells. They just fill wherever in the curve, especially I think I said in a recent episode I've got Shivan Devastator as a red 1-drop. That's X and a red 0 enters with X +1 on counters on it. I've got that as a 1-drop because my 1-drops are non-existent.
You could trigger a Blood Artist, I guess.
Technically counts. Yeah. It's technically a 1-drop, but I know there's something that I need to get better at. But for me, when I am counting cards, effectively it's where is it actually going to see use? Because, in theory, there's a world where Force of Will isn't a 5-mana spell, it's a 0-mana spell. I would classify it the way it's going to be used the most. So, Shriekmaw can be played as a creature. You can cast it as a creature. But I see most of the time it's going to be evoked out for that cheaper cost, basically.
Yeah. So when you're doing your set skeleton, you're counting Shriekmaw as 2-mana, 1 black sorcery.
Exactly, yeah. I would classify it as a sorcery speed piece of removal for me.
Yeah, that checks out.
Some other things that we should touch on in terms of downsides of a cube skeleton before we kind of start looking at it proper is that I don't want to say it won't lead to a deep environment, but it is a starting point. I think is the best way to describe it. Like for some people, just adding all the best cards to a cube is what they want. But a lot of the coolest things that we think about in terms of cube and cube experiences are because the designer has added something on top. They've added those packages, they've added those additional synergies, and you tend to not get that if you just add the best cards. Like people can still find these synergies. They still, if you just smush all the best cards from a certain period of Magic into each other, people will find cool things to do with them. But what I mean is you can still use the set skeleton as a guide and keep that in mind. So you can play Kiki Jiki as one of your red 5-drop creatures, and then you can add Pessimite and Splinter Twin as your blue 3-drops, for example. That's adding a additional level of synergy to a deck or to the cube that isn't just big, powerful, good cards into each other, basically. That is something to consider. Because for the modern bordered cube I'm thinking of building, I use this as a start, and I'm going to go away and think about it and talk to my playgroup about what packages, what additional bits of synergy do we want, what cool decks can we add by cutting a generic creature for a synergistic piece that works better in a cube environment. These are things that kind of like for me, the skeleton is the starting point, it's the jump off point, and then effectively the things that make the cube you or yours, and for your playgroups, you will then start adding on top to an extent. A lot of those will come over time and iteration. You add more cards that you like and work well together as time goes on.
Yeah, for sure. And I think how you want to use this skeleton sort of depends partly on what are you doing to make your cube unique, right? Because generally we don't set out to build cubes that are just the same as a bunch of other cubes that came before, right? If you're going to the effort of building a cube, which is a lot of effort, you've got to order cards, you've got to get 10,000 sleeves, you've got to get a giant
so many
box.
sleeves.
So you're generally doing that because you're like, oh, I've got this really cool idea. I think it would be a really fun environment to play. I think I'd love to draft it. I think I have a play group who would enjoy drafting it. And generally that's because there's something a little bit different about your cube compared to all the other cubes. And if that thing that is different is something like like your Eldraine era cube, right? It's a nostalgia-based thing, or it's a themed around art or a set or whatever it might be, then that is a good candidate to use the skeleton because your theme isn't causing you to diverge from it, right? Whereas if the thing that is making it super unique is that we're really based around certain very synergistic packages or which rely on high numbers of specific types, like say you're going really deep on an artifacts deck. This template is there presumably going to break down a little bit, right? Because by necessity to make that deck work, you're going to have to go over the recommended artifact count. Or if your cube is something really off the deep end, like I think, 100 Ornithopters was a great example. This skeleton doesn't work at all because you've imposed a massive restriction on the types, which is kind of going to invalidate this. But I think all all the cubes where the thing you're making it unique isn't something that's directly causing you to diverge from a skeleton, then I think it's a really good thing to use.
Exactly, and it's a thing of like we are talking about these caveats, but I do think this cube skeleton, or the idea of a cube skeleton, will hold up for like 75 to 90% of cubes. Like, it's not really going to work for like deserts or the everything revolving around like, or 100 of one creature, those kind of environments. But like, we talked about every card having morph last week. Like, that is a possibility for a cube. This would probably still work there. Like this set skeleton works for. It works as a base for all of my cubes. We will go on to later how we can change it and why you should change it. But I think a good thing to do now is actually just go over the set skeleton itself. Actually talk about what we see in front of us. And again, links down to show notes. It'll be there. The gist is you open it up, and there's a skeleton for 4 different sizes. There's 360, 450, 540, and 720. If you're not building one of those, I'm sorry. I couldn't be asked to make this multiple times. And recently, those are the 4 most common cube sizes, because 360 is enough for 8 drafters, 450 is enough for 10 drafters, 550 is 12, 720 is 16 drafters. Those are the common sizes that we generally see. And like 550 is the most common, I think. That's what the Mitgo Vintage Cube, what the Arena Cube is. That's what I think most of ours are, James. But like those 4 sizes, you should be able to find something that works for you. And if you are something in between, then you can look at the one above it and the one below it and kind of find a nice line that works for you.
Yeah, for sure. It's it's sort of up to you how you want to use this, I guess, right? You can use it as this is the exact size of my cube, and I'm going to use the exact counts in all of these categories. That would work really well, but you can always also use it as just more of a guideline, more of a point of comparison.
Yeah, 100%. Like I have structured this in a way where we have given firm numbers for things, but the reality is everything is slightly fluid. You can go up and down one, like as long as you have a reason why. Like, again, we'll get on to the reasons why in a bit, but like it's, I've given firm numbers because I've found when I put things on the internet that have ballparks, I get a lot of questions on them. Like, oh, this says 10 to 12, which was better? Like, I don't care. Like, follow the numbers here and you'll be fine. If you want to change one if you want to move one up and down, it's not the end of the world. But like, it's again, this is a starting point. This is a jump off point. Because what you will see in the set skeleton is the skeleton will tell you how many cards in each color and type you need to add. For creatures, there is also the mana value of each. So it'll tell you how many 1 drops, 2 drops, 3 drops, up to 8 in each color you need to run. We don't go that deep for non-creature spells, because generally if you're just adding the best ones, they will work in a curve, but try not to just be like, oh, it says I can run 18 blue instants in a 450 cube, therefore I'm going to run 18 6-drop instants. Like, you're going to run the best ones. Some of those are generically going to be 1 drops, 2 drops, and 3 drops. So kind of like follow the curve of the creatures to an extent, but you don't have to be as rigid. Like, because realistically, it is the curve of the creatures that will affect the board states a bit more. So that's why there's curves for creatures, but not for instants and sorceries. There is also notes on staples. So staples are cards that we know we're going to run. So, for example, it's like in white, in a 550 cube, we want 4 bits of instant speed removal. We want 2 sorcery speeds, bits of removal, and 3 board wipes. These are the core cards that you see in every cube that they just need to make work. Even if you're doing a theme, you still need removal in black. You need hand attack, this kind of stuff. You need ramp in green. These are important things that I think if we are building the best of cubes, you should be running these staple cards. If you want to, again, you can use this as a jumping off point if you're like, oh, there's no removal in my cube. That's a choice you have made. But as a base, for each number and for each color, we tell you how many staples to run, because I think it is important to run these. It'll give you, the goal of the set skeleton is to leave you with a good, working, functioning, awesome cube. And if you follow these, you will get that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I like as well the a little bit of details in here, like suggestions of like how many of your sorceries should ramp you in your green, or how much, or suggestions for how many card draw spells, how much rummaging in your red. I think these are really nice guidelines, and it's also nice, when you build a cube, because it's so many cards and you're spinning a lot of plates, right? And it's nice to have those things flagged up, right? Of like, oh, actually, I have like no filtering in my red section currently. That's going to make the decks kind of inconsistent. Maybe we should add some. It's nice to have those little cues, I think, as you're building.
Yeah, and it is something we could have gone into much more granular detail on, like the Wizards building set skeleton I touched on earlier. Like that literally goes into the detail of like, oh, how I need a this drop with this keyword, or one of these two keywords with set mechanic. We're not going that deep because it's a guide, but I'm also aware of I don't want everyone to just build the same cube afterwards. Like cube is an expression of yourself as a cube builder, or yourself or your play group. Why it says 6 removal spells in black in a 550 cube is not because it doesn't say run these 6, is because I want you to pick the 6 that you like. That's important.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like the Wizard's set skeleton is, to a certain extent, a cautionary tale of that, because I think there was definitely a point where, as someone drafting most of the sets, at least a little bit, I sort of knew what was in the set skeleton. I kind of felt it. It's like, yeah, sure, here's the Tormenting Voice variant. Here's the green 6 mana creature that gains me some life. Here's the green 4 mana creature with reach. Like, it's... After set number 5 of that, it does start to get a little bit tedious. So
exactly, and it's a good thing and a bad thing. Like just on that, like it means that their ratio of hit draft environments in terms of how fun they are to play has gone up. Like when we started drafting, like initially, there were like more bad sets that were less fun to draft because they hadn't really nailed this yet. And the flip side is now we're in a point where there's 6 standard sets a year. We're just seeing more of them, and it's kind of like it's more noticeable. When there's 3 months between every set, it's less noticeable, the repeating of effects and the repeating of spells. When it's 6 weeks between a set, you see it more. But this is not a podcast where we complain about turtles again.
Yeah. So I think you're right. I do think there was a point, to me, it was about sort of Ether Drift and the lots of sets leading up to that, where they had a run of, yes, there were no bad sets. There were no really bad sets, really. But they also felt a little bit safe, and there weren't really many all-timers in that sort of 18 months either. I think they went through a phase where they were quite rigid on that stuff, and they all worked, they were all fine, but it was very much but I think they weren't taking those big risks. They were quite on template, on brand. They didn't have the home runs either,
Yeah, I'd agree, and that's kind of what I was not directly what I was alluding to when I was talking about some of the downsides of using a set skeleton, is that, but like because you will have more time than Wizards to make your cube. If they're making a set every 3 months, they just need to we just need to get this out the door. That's kind of I am sympathetic to an extent for that. Like, or for the designers, I'm very sympathetic. For the CEOs and such, less. But like it's when you're building your cube, you have more than 6 weeks between building one cube and building the next cube to think about this and to find those deeper synergies, to find those cool interactions, to think of sort of like, again, the modern bordered one I built, the starting point is all the good cards, but I'm going to talk to my playgroup about what do we like from that period. Should we be doing some Siege Rhino stuff? Like, what cards do we remember as a collective, and what decks do we remember from like standard or modern at the time that people like? How can we reflect those? That's what will give you that deep environment. Having that additional time with the set skeleton to let it percolate and let it kind of work for you, that's what will give you that deeper environment that I think we're alluding to, that some of the draft sets haven't had as much.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have way more freedom when building your cube than Wizards designers do when building a set, right?
They have to build it around the theme that the set is. As a cube designer, you can stick on a theme, or you can entirely make your own, or do whatever you want. And that's the best part about Cube. And this is a tool to help you with that experience, to make it easier and less stressful for you. I think let's actually touch on... the set skeleton is laid out with how many you should run in each section and each color, and then curves for creatures. We're not going to sit here and read it out to you because that's boring. We're going to go over the broad design choices that we see here and talk about roughly why they are that way. And again, it's to give you information behind the decisions we have made, not list them all out. So a good place to start, a good place to start is white, because Wooburg, hooray. What you'll notice with white in the cube, and in most cubes, is that white has more cheap creatures. White has the second most creatures in the cube. It's quite a high creature count, just after green. But a lot of those creatures are in the cheap drops. They're like 1, 2, and 3. That is where the bulk of the white creatures are. If you've played a cube, you know that white tends to be aggressive. It tends to it's what white generally does best. That's why it's reflected here in that design choice. It also, white as a color, has more enchantments than other colors, because we tend to see removal in white as well. Things like Oblivion Ring effects tend to show up a lot in white because they're one of the best things that white can do. The point of a cube skeleton is to highlight what the colors do best. So that's one reason why we see cheaper white or more cheap white creatures and more enchantments.
Yes, for sure. And I think I would be focusing more with removal on how many removal spells I have, rather than sticking super rigidly to which colors they fall into, right? Which types they fall into, right? Like if I want to have, say, rather than 2 sorcery and 3 enchantment removal spells, if I wanted to have 5 sorceries or 5 enchantments for word removal, I think that's fine, because they're still all filling the same role, right? They're having the same function.
Exactly, and and again, we'll get onto this, but especially if you were pushing enchantments as a deck, if you were pushing enchantments in white, a great lever you can turn is, I will add more enchantment removal, cut it from instant, cut it from sorcery, so I can have that additional level of synergy with something else. That's a reason to make a change. That's a reason to break the set skeleton. That's good. We like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving on to blue. Blue, shockingly, has the least creatures. It has the least creatures of any color, because it wants to make room for more instant and sorceries. It has the most instants by quite a long way of any color, because that's what blue does best. We want to we are wanting to highlight the counter magic in blue, the cantrips, the card draw, the cool interaction. That is what blue is really known for. We want to make room for that, and that is what you will generally see in most cubes, and also most decks running blue.
I mean, blue historically has had kind of weak creatures, like small understated creatures, and makes up for it in the spells effect. So yeah, it's it makes a lot of sense to reflect that in the skeleton.
Yeah. Then when you move on to black, black has the black and red both have an average number of creatures. They're both right slap bang in the middle in terms of number of creature count. Black has, I think, the highest number of sorceries of any color. That's because we generally see, in black sorceries, we see things like hand attack, we see removal, we see reanimation spells. That's also reflected in, black also has 3 enchantments. When I think of black enchantments, I am thinking of things like animate dead, that kind of stuff. But like they can be something else, but there's room for them in here.
Yeah, it's interesting, the balance of instants and sorceries versus between blue and black. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because both blue having way more instants, black having way more sorceries, because they both have a form of interaction that is unique to that color, right? Only black gets discard spells, only blue gets permission. And permission inherently only works if it's instant, and WotC don't like us to have instant speed discard because someone decided that thoughts using them in their draw step isn't fun. I respectfully disagree, but each to their own.
Have you never Vendilion clicked someone?
Oh, it's such a good time.
Live the dream. Yeah, and also with black, it does have a bit more of a flatter curve. Like, it's one of the few ones that has the same number of 2 drops and 3 drops. That's just where the power level traditionally tends to be in black. In red, as we mentioned, it has an average number of creatures. Again, that's kind of partly because it does have a high instant and sorcery count, higher than something like white or green, because it generally has good ones. Like, we love Lightning Bolt, we love Wheel of Fortune, we love these awesome kind of effects. And from a creature point of view, it has the most 1-drops. It has noticeably the most 1-drops. And again, this is definitely the classic version of red, where mono red, or where your red deck is going to be aggressive, the power traditionally with red is in the cheap creatures. This is one point where it doesn't work as well in, like, for a powered cube. We'll touch on why in a little bit, but like, this has like over half the creatures in red are 1 or 2 drops. That's quite an aggressive section, and this is one point where I could see people making changes if they don't want red to be as aggressive. But like, traditionally in most cubes and in most environments, if you go back through standard, if you go back through modern and these kind of environments, that is where the power level of red has tended to be.
Yeah, for sure. It's anticipating your red decks wanting to curve out with cheap creatures, right? If that's the case in your cube, then the red numbers are probably pretty good. If it's not the case and your red decks are more about expensive spells, then maybe you can tweak that curve upwards a little bit, and it's going to start looking more like the curve of creatures we have in green, say. Yeah.
Moving on to green. Green, quite unsurprisingly, has the most creatures of any color. It has the least instants, the least sorceries. Because its power, green traditionally, its power is in the creatures. It has a bunch of 1-drops because traditionally these are going to be your mana dorks. It has more 5-drops than any other color because green 5-drops are traditionally very good. It has more 6, 7, and 8 drops than any other color because green is generally going to be ramping, going to be playing some big creatures. Green's power is with what it's putting onto the board, less so about its stuff doing its less so than its stuff doing in its hand, and that's really reflected in this cube skeleton.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When you get to colorless, we've broken colorless down by creatures, planeswalkers, and artifacts. There's curves for creatures and there's curves for artifacts. Creatures it's a bit of a normal curve, but there is a bit more room in the top end because generally in colorless we see things like Eldrazi or big artifact creatures. They're cheat targets that can go in multiple decks. They're generally quite nice, like being on colorless, because it means they can go in any deck trying to run them. When it comes to artifacts, it is a pretty normal curve here. But yeah, colorless, pretty solid, pretty standard. It's your colorless creatures, like your Eldrazi and your artifact creatures, and then your artifacts are your non-creature artifacts.
Yeah, for sure. I always wonder with colorless stuff how I'm meant to be categorizing it, because quite often you end up with a bunch of colorless spells in your cube that only really go in 1 or 2 decks, right? So to use my dual commander cube as an example, right? Playing Candelabra of Tornos in the artifact slot, but that is only ever going in a blue deck, right? I don't think there's many slots where you'd put that in a non-blue deck, or even something like I don't know, Sword of a Meek, right? You're not putting it in a non-blue deck, but it is in the colorless slot. It's not taking up a blue slot. So if I'm trying to balance out all the colors in my cube, should I really be putting those in blue slots? Because otherwise, my blue card, but they're actually blue cards in terms of the deck building space they're in, right? And am I just sneaking extra blue cards in there and unbalancing my colors?
So being honest, if you're starting off, don't worry about it. Is my honest opinion, and my hot take is, if you're starting off, don't worry about it too much. As you start getting more confident, you can start tailing, because like in theory, the average colorless section is going to be, what you said is very true, but that's kind of true for every artifact. It's kind of like, it's like, where do you consider a card like Bone Splitter? Like, if you have, like, it's like, to an extent, colorless, the nice thing about colorless is that technically they are cards that can go in any deck. But like, if you've noticed, you put in 2 cards for your blue deck, or put in 2 cards for your green deck, what's a green deck going to want from an artifact? Maybe it's more ramp. Maybe it's a big cheaty, like a triplicate Titan to ramp to, something like that. Like that. That's kind of how you can keep it balanced. Is if you know these cards are for this color, just make sure all your colors are taken care of. But that's definitely something you can kind of come to later on if you, as you kind of get more comfortable with the cube building. My honest opinion is, to begin with, these are slots for you to play with. Choose them, like put them in as you want.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Yeah, because like if like in this cube, right, a big part of what blue is doing is the artifact stuff, right? So there's by necessity lots of cheap artifacts which are going to be more likely to go in a blue deck than a non-blue deck. So like maybe there's an argument for you play less actual blue cards to compensate for that.
Yeah, 100%. I do see what you're going. Yeah, I do see where you're going. But I when it comes to colors, I generally don't think you need to be as strict as you need to be with the other colors, because in theory, someone else still might take it. Like it's in the draft. It's freer for someone to kind of spec on or take, because it goes in any deck. In theory, you are less likely to get a colorless card than you are a colored card, because it's because of openness in the draft, that kind of stuff.
That's true. And lots of the cheap artifacts in most cubes are going to be just mana anyway, which do go in any deck.
Let's move on to multicolored. For multicolored, we've given a total and how many of each guild or try and 5-color. So in a 360 cube, you run 4 cards in each 2-color guild. In multicolored, you run 5 in each 2-color guild. In a 540, you run 6, and in a 720, you run 8. Basically, the bigger the cube is, the more room you have for multicolored spells. Also here, we haven't worried too much about curve. This is, to an extent, your choice as the cube designer, what you put in. Because the monocoloreds are curved correctly, you have that flexible. It doesn't have to be as strict. But do try and think about what your deck is trying to do. If you know your Boros deck is going to be aggressive, don't fill it with 6 drops. You can have 1, but don't have all 6 of my gold Boros cards being 6 drops or more if I want the deck to be aggro. Put in the 2 drops, the 3 drops, that kind of stuff. This is very much up to you. And also, a note on multicolored, if I was running signets or talismans, I would include them here, because they are yes, they can go in other decks, and yes, people can splash them, but from a purely organizational point of view, Azorius Signet is an Azorius card, not a colorless card. Just from an organizational point of view, that's how I would do it for this type of, but when you're putting the cube together anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think the signets are often there's almost 2 modes for them, right? There's they're just good cards when they're fully on color and they're giving you fixing as well as acceleration, and then they also sometimes go in just an artifact deck or a ramp deck that doesn't care about the colors and just needs acceleration.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to lands. Generally here, the bigger the cube, the more lands you get to get, the more lands you get to run. Similarly to multicolored cards, we've listed how many each guild gets to run. You get more the bigger the size of the cube. I have also listed tri-lands in here, like things like triomes or like tap 3-color lands are just really good and run in a bunch of cubes. If you don't like them, you can just run more duels. That's perfectly fine. And then also, we've listed how many 5-color or utility lands you can run as well. Now, these utility lands can also be monocolored. So, in a higher-powered cube, like your Gaia's Cradle or your Tolarian Academy, this is where you can make room for them. This is something that James, I do personally tend to run more utility lands because I like them and I think they're good, but I've had to make room for them somewhere else. But like as a base level, this is how many, we've listed here how many you can run in your cube.
Yeah, and again, if you're running decks which really care about those utility lands and they're doing more for you than just having an extra creature land or something, and that's certainly a number you might want to tweak, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's the reason why we put it in here like this is because there is definitely a quality drop off from higher powered level cubes to more like mid-powered cubes in terms of the utility lands you can run. There is a big drop-off between Tolarian Academy and the next best version of that effect.
Yeah, they keep trying to do fake Tellurian academies, and they really don't work. There's the one that gives improvise. It's kind of cool.
That's quite hard. Yeah. And I do like that. There's the enchantment that flips into a academy, which is a budget academy anyway, which I quite like. But anyway, so that's kind of what you will see when you load up the set skeleton. Again, it is a great base for anyone putting a cube together. And even if you have a cube, just double check it. Have a look. The last thing I think is important to touch on is reasons why you break the set skeleton, reasons why you move away. Like we've touched on a couple of times, the Miko Vintage Cube has a bunch more 0 drop artifacts because that's where the power level is. Like when we were talking about red creatures in this cube or in the set skeleton, red has a bunch more 1 drops than the Miko Vintage Cube does. That's because the Miko Vintage Cube is trying to run the most powerful cards possible, and in that environment, the power level is 3, not 1. So in the Miko Vintage Cube, they've made the decision to run less 1 drops to run more 3 drops because that's where the power level in the busted cards they printed recently has been. But that's a reason, and that's important. Having a reason to make a change is the important part. If you can explain it, then do it. Like another good example is for my personal cube, like my main cube, which we spoke about a few weeks ago when we did the review of it. I am pushing an artifact deck. To make room for that deck, I've run less sorceries and instants and enchantments in white, blue, black, and red because I've replaced some of the effects I would get there with artifacts that do a similar thing. That's given me the ability to boost up that artifact number, and it's meant that my cube varies from the set skeleton because rather than in white in a 540 cube, from the set skeleton you would normally run 1 artifact. In my cube that's pushing an artifact deck, I'm running 5 in white. That's a choice I've made. That's a reason behind it. I can explain it. That's a good reason to break a cube skeleton. What's not a good reason is, I really like this red 7-drop, but I don't have room for it. I'm going to add it. If you do that once, you'll be okay. If you do that all over the shop at multiple points, not having a reason to break from it, you're just putting in cards you like, then you're not really using a set skeleton. You're just that's when the draft environment will be directly affected by the choices that you make.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other sort of reason you will do a lot of small breaks from it, even in cubes which are mostly conforming, is just because there aren't cards you're excited about in that exact slot, and we can therefore tweak those numbers, right? So, for example, in a 540, I think the set skeleton recommends 4 blue 1-drop creatures. My dual mana cube doesn't have any because there weren't any blue 1-drop creatures I wanted to include, and we can roll that number up into the 2s, and that's fine. That's not going to cause a big break because blue isn't really being a curve out deck anyway, right? Whereas if we were looking at, say, white 2-drops, it's really important for white to hit its creature on turn 2 in a lot of cubes, so that's a number where we can't really just roll that to the next point on the curve because there are more exciting options.
Exactly, and with that as well, I could definitely see that being more of an issue. The bigger your, I'm going to say, restraint or your constriction. So, for example, if you're building a pauper cube, you just have less cards to build from than a cube running uncommons and rares. Or if you're doing a themed cube, or if you're doing a set cube, like a cube, everything set on Dominaria, you just have less cards to pick from. So I could see a world where there's less options for you. Maybe as well, like not just roll up creatures, so go from a 1-drop to a 2-drop, maybe add another 1-drop sorcery, so your curve is still quite nice there. That's definitely a thing you can do.
Yeah, for sure. And the pauper cube's a great point as well, because our planeswalker numbers are generally going to go to 0 in our pauper cube. So those are slots we can redistribute elsewhere.
Yeah, and this is definitely one where I have given some numbers for the greater good, not my personal opinion. I'm I'm 36. I'm not that old, but I feel old. I'm an old soul. I hate Planeswalkers just as a card design. I hate them. I don't run many in my cubes. Like, I run the ones I think are cool, but there aren't that many of them. So in my cubes, I have way less Planeswalkers. But I think the average cube and the average player likes Planeswalkers more than me. So that's why they are reflected. And just like, yeah, the bigger your cube, the more Planeswalkers you get. If you don't like them, and again, that's a reason. I have to say not liking, but like I'm finding similar power level of cards to put in their place. Things that synergy. I realize it's a starting point. Do as I say, not as I do, I think is the best way of putting it.
Oh no, I think I don't like it is a great reason. Like,
yeah,
you're building a cube because you want to play it, like, as a starting point, right? Like, don't put in cards you don't enjoy playing with or playing against. I don't know, like, cubes generally are a reflection of the person building them, right? Unless you're going out and building, like, you know, max power cube, then it's, you know, you don't have that much freedom, right? But outside of that, like, yeah, most, you know, play cards you like. Like, don't just go and pick 540 cards you think are cool with no discipline. I mean, you can do that and you'll have fun, but it'll be a weird environment. But within the constraints of what's going to keep the cube functional, like, you still have loads of choices and loads of options, and picking cards you like and you think are fun to play with is a really good starting point. And I think kind of justification enough in a lot of the time, as long as you're, you know, and what this skeleton is a framework to help you do that and still have a functional cube that plays well.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really nice way of pulling it all together, actually, because, like, I used this when making that or starting to design the modern bordered cube that I'm thinking of building, and it was one of the most fun I've had putting a cube together, because it was just, okay, I'm just going to search for, I'm going to start off white 1-drop creatures. Which are my 8 favorites from this list? And you just start adding cards that you like, rather than having to think, like, for me, it was definitely a more freeing way of building a cube than I've done it previously. Previously, I've been way more tied to, here are my 10 guild colors. This is what each deck is doing. I need a card for each before I start going. And you can then, it's more faff. This was a very, like, honestly, I could see myself building, or at least base designing more cubes. Maybe not building more cubes, because I do need to be at least somewhat conscious of cash at some point in this Magic the Gathering environment. But, like, I could see myself just putting bases for, like, making a bunch more cubes from a set scaling point of view, just because it is fun to be like, what's the coolest card from this Scryfall search that I've put in as my base? What are the coolest cards I can run? And just start adding cards you like. Knowing that I'm going to have something functional that works at the end is a really nice experience.
Yeah, for sure. The other nice thing about building cubes that way, where it's kind of just cards you think are cool, and then a reasonable number in each slot, is that you can also crowdsource those ideas. You know, put it in your WhatsApp group with people who play Cube, and Magic players love talking about, oh, you remember this card from 2014, wasn't that dope? That's like 50% of Magic player interactions at a certain point, I think. And yeah, you can get lots of great ideas that way.
I do quite like that. There is a world where maybe I just cut a card from every section in that list and just be like, open it up to our WhatsApp group of like, what do I add? What do you want?
Yeah.
I don't hate that. No, awesome. Right, I think that's a really good place to end it. James, thanks for your time today. Really good chat.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, the cube skeleton is down in the show notes below. Yeah, and I do also, like, I think it's worth caveating at the end of the episode, just saying that I do know that everyone will have their opinion on this. Some will be like, what? That many of this thing? How dare you? That's so wrong. At the end of the day, it's a starting point. And as we said, if you have a reason to change it, then I think that's fine. I have not stuck to this religiously. It's a starting point. It's a very useful tool, and I hope everyone listening finds it helpful as well. that's where we're going to end it for today. Do make sure you like, share, subscribe, give the podcast a 5-star review, all that good stuff. Until next time, where we'll be back with our set review for Strixhaven Part 2 Electric Boogaloo. Can you tell I've not looked up the name of the set yet? Until then, it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.